The girl went for a walk and disappeared under strange circumstances. What happened next can give any detective thriller a run for its money, because absolutely no one could have expected such a number of unexpected twists and shocking discoveries. This case became one of the most confusing in history, but in the end, detectives managed to get to the truth. Crystalline Malins was born on August 28, 1960, in the American city of Columbus, Ohio. She grew up in a very large family. Her parents had 5 children. They all lived in a quiet residential area, away from the bustle of the city. In the summer of 1975, when Christy was 14, she spent most of her time walking with friends or with her sisters. Most often, they liked to go to the public pool, located on the territory of a residential complex near Christy's house. In addition, the girl sometimes worked as a nanny and stayed to look after small children. On August 22nd, a woman she knew asked Christy to sit with a child until late in the evening. The next day, the girl woke up around midday and started thinking about how to pass the time. There were only 5 days left until her birthday, and she was looking forward to it. It was a very hot day, so Christy decided without thinking twice that the best choice would be to go to the pool. She took her sister, Kim, who was a year younger than her, with her, and the girls went there. Kim immediately went swimming, and her sister stayed on the lounger. A few minutes later, she saw her friend approach Christy. They talked about something and then left. Kim was surprised that her sister left her alone without warning, but decided not to catch up with her and stayed in the pool. Sometime later, Kim went home, but her sister was not there. After a few hours, she was already worried, because Christy did not even come in for lunch. The girl decided to walk along the streets and look for her sister, and soon ran into one of the neighbors. He said that a couple of hours earlier, the police had found the girl's body a few kilometers away, but were unable to establish her identity. Kim ran home and told her parents, who immediately called the police and explained that they could not find their daughter. They were called to the morgue and shown the body of the dead girl, but at first the parents could not understand whether it was really their daughter. The problem was that the deceased's face was covered with so many abrasions that it was simply impossible to discern any features. But then, the mother saw a birthmark on the girl's leg and realized that it was Christy. Having established her identity, the police told the shocked relatives what had happened. Around 2:30, a man called 911 and said that he had found a human body in a wooded area behind a shopping center. He, his wife and son had gone there to buy toys for their daughter. But before the family arrived at the shopping center, their son said that he wanted to walk in the wooded area behind the building. There was a path among the trees that all the locals knew about. It led to the river, and in general this place was quite picturesque, so people often came there to walk. The parents agreed and went along this path deep into the forest. Sometime later, when the family was already returning, they suddenly noticed something strange a few dozen meters from the path. Looking closely, they saw a man on the ground, bending over someone and hitting him with a piece of wood. This man saw that people were looking at him and started to run. After that, the father of the family came closer to that place and found a girl covered in blood on the ground. His wife, who was taking medical training courses, tried to feel the victim's pulse, but could not feel it. Considering that there were no mobile phones in those years, the man immediately ran to the shopping center and called the police from there. He and his wife provided investigators with a description of the criminal. He was a young man, a tall, thin guy in his 20s, with long, dark hair that reached his shoulders, wearing only denim shorts and boots. Based on this testimony, the police put together a rough sketch of the suspect and sent it to the patrol. An inspection of the crime scene yielded no results. They found a piece of wood that was used as a murder weapon, but no clues that could lead them to the perpetrator were found. It is worth noting that the victim's hands were tied with a telephone wire, and the top of her swimsuit was pulled down. The t-shirt she was wearing that day was found next to the body, as were her boots. Despite all this, medical examiners were unable to find any traces of sexual violence. Investigators admitted that the perpetrator planned to rape her, but was scared off. Despite the lack of clues, the police quickly realized in which direction they should work. Christie's younger sister said that the girl left the pool with her friend named Carol, and the police went to talk to her. Carol said that day she received a call on her home phone from a man who introduced himself as a DJ at a local radio station. He said that there would be a cheerleading competition in their town, and the winners would get free tickets to the state fair. The caller said that the event would be behind the mall and would start at 1:45 p.m. He told her to wait at the entrance to the trail into the woods, where she would be met, and explained everything. Apparently, the police found this story very suspicious, but even more strange things were waiting for them. Carol said that she had originally decided to go to the event with her sister, but halfway there, they ran into Christie and her sister. Carol eventually invited Christie to come with her. They left her sisters and went towards the mall. The girls came to the beginning of the trail into the woods and sat on the fence waiting, but no one was there. Some time later, Carol said that she would go to the mall and ask the time. The round trip took her only a few minutes, but when she returned, Christie was gone. She waited for a while, but no one showed up, and eventually the girl left. The police found no evidence that a cheerleading competition was planned in the city. They assumed that the caller could have been the killer, trying to lure Carol into the woods. Or it could have been some kind of prank unrelated to the murder. In any case, they could not trace the call, so it was impossible to find out the caller's identity. In addition, investigators noted one controversial point in Carol's story. She said that she met Christie and her sister on the street when she was walking to the mall. However, Kim claimed that she and her sister were at the pool, and Carol came to them there. But that's not all. Late that evening, Christie's mother met with Carol, who lived just a few dozen meters from their house. And a very strange conversation took place between them. Carol began to apologize to the woman and said that it should not have gone so far. The girl added that she was originally supposed to be the victim and that two people were involved in the murder. Shocked, Christie's mother tried to get details, but Carol refused to continue the conversation and left. The woman told the police about this, and they spoke with Carol again, but the girl said that she did not say anything like that and insisted on the truthfulness of her original version. As a result, she was interrogated using a polygraph, and the operator recorded no signs of lying on key issues. After that, investigators stopped focusing their attention on Carol and continued to look for other leads. Over the next few days, as news of the brutal murder spread throughout the area, local residents were seized by mass fear. They understood that a dangerous criminal was still at large. The situation was aggravated by another fact. The police believed that the killer was someone local because he knew about the trail behind the mall. Detectives put all their resources into finding the culprit, and 3 days after Christie's murder, the long-awaited breakthrough in this case occurred. At about 5 p.m., a police officer was patrolling the central area of Columbus when he suddenly saw a man who looked strikingly similar to the portrait of Christie's killer. The patrolman immediately contacted the detectives, who quickly arrived at the scene. They offered the man to voluntarily go with them to the station to answer a few questions, and he agreed. It turned out to be 25-year-old Jack Carmen. Despite the fact that he voluntarily went for questioning, the police immediately ran into a problem. The man had a fairly severe form of mental retardation. His IQ, according to various tests, was estimated at around 50 points. Jack was under the supervision of a specialized medical institution and lived in an apartment provided to him by the non-profit organization where he worked. He could not read or write and spoke poorly. But the detectives in the Christie case couldn't help but notice the almost 100% resemblance of the man to the composite sketch. The interrogation was very difficult. Most often, Jack answered the investigators' questions with one word, or remained silent altogether. They also began to doubt that he was even able to fully understand and comprehend the meaning of their questions. In the end, it all dragged on for 6 hours. But in the end, the detectives began to feel something. By asking the most simple and specific questions, they were able to get the long-awaited confessions from Jack. According to his words, that day he left his house and took a bus to the shopping center to buy himself pants and a t-shirt. Walking through the parking lot to the entrance, he noticed Christie in the distance, sitting on the fence near the beginning of the path leading into the forest. He approached the girl, grabbed her, tied her hands, and dragged her into the forest, where he abused her. After that, Christie tried to run away, and then Jack caught up with her, picked up a wooden block from the ground, and hit the girl on the head with it many times. Then he ran to the main road in front of the shopping center and jumped on a bus. The next day, the police took him to the same forest, and Jack pointed out the place where he committed the crime. The man also gave investigators details that only a criminal would know, such as that the wooden block broke in half when he hit the victim with it. On top of all this, they lined up several people, including Jack, and asked the couple who found Christie to identify the man they saw that day. Both pointed to Jack without question. As a result, the man was charged with a number of charges, including abuse. Even though experts found no evidence of sexual abuse, Jack confessed to this, so the prosecution did not exclude this point. The prosecutor decided to seek the death penalty, but Jack's lawyer, with his consent, made a deal. The man had to confess to the crime in front of the judge and receive a life sentence instead of execution. Considering that thousands of people were following the case, everything happened very quickly. On September 3rd, 11 days after the murder, Jack was sentenced to life in prison. However, even such a short trial was enough for many people to begin to doubt Jack's guilt. The more details about his confession and the man himself appeared in the media, the more people began to wonder. Could he have done something like this? Those who knew Jack did not believe it at first. According to them, the man never showed signs of aggression. He was timid and compliant. He could tell any lie if he was forced to do so harshly enough. For example, once at a charity center, he took the blame for a broken boiler, although it was done by another person. There were also great doubts about Jack's physical ability to confess to the crime. The man could barely speak, but the police assured that he had revealed the details of his crime in every detail. Those who knew Jack suspected that the detectives simply fed him all the information they needed. They only had to ask leading questions that already contained facts about the case. For example, did he hit the victim with a wooden block? And if Jack answered yes, the police could use this as a confession. One woman who treated Jack added that, under threats, he would confess to anything. All a man had to do was hear that he was facing the electric chair, and he would do whatever the detectives asked of him. But that's not all. Supporters of Jack's innocence found out that the police brought him to the murder scene at the same time as the witnesses, the same married couple who later identified him among other people at the police station. Thus, it turned out that they had already seen Jack and knew that he was the suspect. The police themselves claimed that the witnesses had not crossed paths with Jack, but no one believed it. There were many other points that raised serious doubts. For example, the police could not find the bus driver or even a single passenger who would have seen Jack without a shirt on the way to the city center. Based on his own confession, this is how he got home. But the most important factor was the testimony of several people who were in the building of the charity organization where Jack lived and worked. They said that they saw the man around 1:30 in the afternoon. If he really was there was absolutely no way for him to get to the shopping center on the outskirts of the city by bus and commit this murder by 1350. Even if he had gotten off right after witnesses saw him, the bus would have covered this distance in at least 40 minutes. All these facts made many people not only doubt Jack's guilt, but also come to the conclusion that the police, in fact, fabricated his confession. Even Christie's parents stopped believing that he was their daughter's killer. On September 9th, just 6 days after the verdict, about 70 people came out to the City Hall to draw attention to the case and demand a thorough investigation. After that, they formed a public committee whose goal was to achieve justice. Jack was given a new lawyer, who immediately filed a petition for a retrial. A few months later, the judge withdrew Jack's plea and ordered a new trial. Now the prosecution had to prove his guilt literally from scratch, which seemed like an almost impossible task. While preparations were underway for the new trial, Christie's father, Norman Millis, was conducting his own investigation. From the very first days, he was distrustful of detectives. The man believed that they were doing a bad job and were not trying to find the real killer of his daughter. In the end, he decided not to rely on the police, but to look for answers on his own. Soon after the murder, he and several neighbors went into the woods to examine it. There he found denim shorts, and his friends found bloody men's underwear. They handed this evidence over to the police, who initially simply did not notice it. However, whether these things were included in the case remains unknown. Jack's new trial began only in 1977, 2 years after the murder. The defense had two goals. The first and main one was to prove Jack's innocence, and the second was to try to establish the identity of the real killer. And they already had a candidate for this role, whom they considered the most likely criminal, the same man who found Christie's body with his wife. His name was Henry Newell. At the time of the murder, he was 25 years old. By the beginning of the trial, Jack's lawyers had collected an impressive list of reasons to suspect Henry of murder. And during the trial, there were even more. The first thing that attracted attention was the fact that Henry turned out to be a notorious criminal. Beginning in his teens, he was arrested many times for crimes of varying severity. He served 3 prison terms and successfully escaped from there twice until he was caught and sent back. At the time of Jack's trial, he was serving his 4th term. This time, Henry burned down his own house to collect the insurance money. The lawyers also studied the materials of Christie's case and found several very suspicious moments. In his testimony, Henry said that he found her body, ran up to it, and threw aside a piece of wood covered in blood. He himself explained this by the fact that at that moment he was in a state of shock. However, such an act still seemed strange, to pick up a murder weapon and throw it away from the body for no apparent reason. Secondly, from his words, it seemed to him that the girl was still alive, so he took off his t-shirt and put it on the victim's face. This act also raised questions. Was the man really trying to stop the bleeding, or did his t-shirt get stained with blood during the murder? And he needed to somehow justify it. Jack's lawyers found an employee of the store in the shopping center where Henry ran to call the police. She said that he was not wearing a t-shirt, but he was wearing denim shorts. Although by the time the police arrived, he was already wearing different pants. Moreover, the employee said that Henry had a fresh bruise on his face, as if someone had hit him. When the woman was asked why she did not immediately tell the police all this, she replied that no one simply asked her. At the same time, the police themselves, of course, should have seen this bruise, but they ignored it. It is noteworthy that Henry initially even agreed to undergo interrogation using a polygraph, but in the end, he vomited right on the device, and the police did not organize a repeat interrogation. Another witness was Henry's neighbor. He said that on the evening of the murder he talked to him and saw many fresh scratches on his hands. The man added that in Henry's garage he saw a telephone wire of the same color and shape as the victim's bandaged hands. But that's not all. The neighbor said that Henry once shared a very strange story with him. The man stated that he knew Carol, his 14-year-old girlfriend, and that they had been swimming naked in the pool. Considering that he was 25 at the time, this story shocked everyone involved. However, it was not possible to find direct evidence that this had actually happened, for obvious reasons. However, this indicated that Henry knew Carol, who was also directly involved in this case. His wife Pam also testified at the trial. She said that everything happened exactly as they told the police on the first day. She, her husband, and their son went to the mall. The son wanted to take a walk, and they found the body in the woods. The woman added that Henry had been home until that time and had only gone out for a few minutes to chase away the neighbor's children who had started throwing firecrackers into their yard. Carol also answered the lawyer's questions. The first thing she said was that she had never known Henry. She was also asked what she meant when she told the victim's mother that things should not have gone that far. But at the trial, Carol said she did not remember saying anything like that. Henry himself was also brought into the courtroom straight from prison. He repeated his story without any changes and insisted that he had nothing to do with this crime. One of the most significant moments of the trial was the showing of the full recording of Jack's interrogation. After watching it, it became obvious to everyone present that the man was simply forced to confirm the detective's words that he committed this murder. Jack barely spoke and, apparently, did not really understand what the police wanted from him. But this was not the main thing in the entire trial. On the fifth day, another witness appeared, whom neither the prosecution nor Jack's lawyer expected. It was Bobby, Henry's adopted son, and his story truly shocked everyone who followed this case. The boy said that Henry actually left the house that day to chase away children who were throwing firecrackers into their yard. However, he was gone not for a few minutes, as his mother said, but for more than half an hour. When the man returned home, his t-shirt and sandals were missing, and there were scratches on his hands and face. Henry called Pam into another room, where they talked about something. After that, they went out and told Bobby that they were now all going to the mall together. Upon arriving at the place, his parents immediately took him to the path behind the mall. The boy clarified that he did not ask to go for a walk there, as his parents initially said. They went into the woods and almost immediately found Henry's sandals, one of which was torn. After walking further, they saw Christie's body, and his mother told him never to tell anyone about what he saw. The boy added that he decided to tell the truth only after he talked about it with his biological father, who convinced him to do so. His grandmother also testified in court and told about one episode related to Henry. She went with him and Pam to the funeral for Christie. On the way back, the woman said what a terrible tragedy it was, to which Henry suddenly replied that it would teach her to keep her mouth shut. Another witness was Henry's friend. He said that the man once confessed to him that he killed Christie. At the same time, he clarified that the murder was accidental, not planned. In the end, this trial left almost no doubt that Jack had nothing to do with this crime, and in the end, all charges against him were dropped. But here is where the most interesting thing began. Despite the huge amount of evidence in favor of Henry's involvement, the prosecutor said that he did not intend to pursue a case against him. He also noted that the initial investigation was conducted in the best possible way. At the same time, the prosecutor for some reason omitted the fact that the police did not notice or ignored a huge number of leads and evidence that were available to them from day one. His answer caused a wave of indignation from the public. It reached such proportions that after only 2 days, the prosecutor had to take his words back and agreed to reopen the investigation of Christie. But there was one serious problem here too. The investigators used the original investigation as a basis, including the testimony of Henry and Pam. For this reason, the investigators said that they would look for new suspects similar to Jack. Of course, this approach did not lead to any results. The investigation continued for several months, after which it finally froze. Christie's father did not give up trying to achieve justice. At one point, he filed a civil lawsuit against Jack. But the reasons for such a step were not very obvious. The man did not believe in his involvement in the murder, but this trial would allow him to gain access to the case materials, and he would have the opportunity to study them. Unfortunately, this also did not bring any results. In 2006, the father died of cancer, without putting an end to this case. For a long time, there was no progress in the investigation of Christie's murder. Until in 2013, a former lawyer named John Oler became interested in the case. He decided to conduct his own investigation and began calling everyone involved in the case, hoping to find some new leads. Christie's relatives gave him a box with all of her father's notes that he had collected over the years. Oler studied them all, talked to dozens of people, and it became obvious to him that none other than Henry was behind this murder. During his investigation, he found out that the victim's girlfriend, Laurel, was into smoking marijuana at the time. Digging deeper, he found something else and came to the conclusion that she, like other teenagers, was apparently buying it from Henry. This became another link between him and Laurel, and could also indicate why the girl really went into those woods. He admitted that the whole story with the DJ was made up, and Laurel had actually arranged to meet Henry in those woods to buy some illegal substance from him. Perhaps she decided to invite Christie along under some other pretext, for example, using the same story about the DJ and the cheerleading competition. Another, much darker version said that Laurel could have initially lured Christie there at the request of Henry, who planned to abuse her. However, the girl gave him a serious fight, as evidenced by the scratches and abrasions on his body, and the man killed her. Digging into this case, Oler found out that by now Henry had committed even more crimes, including arson, domestic violence, and abuse. There was another incident related to him, but the man was not convicted for it. It was the death of his wife, Pam. She filed for divorce in 1982, and just a month later, she was found dead in her apartment, where she was still living with Henry. The official cause of death was an overdose of sleeping pills, and police found a suicide note indicating that the woman did it herself. Pam's relatives did not believe this version and believed that Henry was to blame. The strangest thing about this whole story was that no package of any sleeping pills was ever found in the apartment, although Pam obviously could not have thrown it away after taking such a quantity of the substance. In the same year, in 2013, when the lawyer took on this case, Henry died of cancer at the age of 63. Despite this, Oler continued to work and published a book in which he collected all the available information about Christie's murder. The publication of the book caused a new wave of interest in this case, and Christie's relatives, along with other interested people, began to bombard the police department with demands to reopen the investigation. In addition, several of Henry's relatives contacted Oler at once, who said their entire family knew perfectly well that he was the one who killed that girl, but they kept silent. And one of the relatives said that a few months before her 16th birthday, Henry gave her a car. They went for a drive together, and at some point he asked her to stop. He looked at her and said that he had killed Christie, and then told her all the details of what he had done. The woman said that she could not believe it. According to her, Henry drank a lot, and she thought that the man had simply made up this story under the influence of alcohol. Everything fell into place. All this led to the fact that the murder investigation was reopened in May 2014. For many months, they reprocessed all the leads, interviewed dozens of people, and re-examined the evidence. Remarkably, in the confession of his relative, Henry said that he had abused Christie. At that time, medical experts did not find any traces. But now, when the girl's clothes were examined using modern technology, they found traces of male semen on her. Unfortunately, they were so small that it was simply impossible to conduct a DNA analysis. The investigation continued until late 2015, when detectives called a press conference. 40 years after the murder, they finally announced that they now had no doubt that Henry had committed the murder. They would have been able to secure a conviction. But now that the man was dead, it was impossible to bring the case to trial. It was only downgraded to solved, and the investigation was over. Of course, without the man's confession, investigators couldn't be 100% sure how it all happened. But they had a rough idea of what happened. Most likely, when Henry left the house that day, he went along that path behind the mall. Perhaps Carell invited him there to buy weed, but that point is still unproven. Once there, Henry saw Christie alone and decided to rape her. He tied the girl's hands with a telephone cable and took her further into the woods, where she tried to resist him. Christie managed to scratch him and hit him in the face, after which the man could have knocked her to the ground and killed her with a piece of wood lying nearby. He then returned home, told his wife what happened, and together they came up with a plan to avoid punishment. It is noteworthy that in all these years, Carol has never told the truth. It cannot be ruled out that she really has something to do with what happened, and perhaps, sooner or later, she will tell everything. During the press conference, the police also apologized to Christie's relatives for how carelessly their predecessors did their job during those years. They had enough evidence to accuse Henry of murder, but the investigators either did not notice it or ignored it. Share your opinion on this story in the comments, and do not forget to like this video if you liked it. Thanks for watching.